Previously, we saw that if we used a length function and we try to find the length of an integer like 1234, we would get a type error, and that type error would say object of type int has no length. This just means that this integer has no length and it's a number, and the length function only takes strings as a value. So if we provide a string, then it's going to work completely fine. Now we can print this out. And as you can see, it worked. Now some of you might have tried to take the user's name and then tried to find out the length of that. What is your name? And then you figure out the length of that and then store it in a variable. And then after that, you might have tried to print that out to the user by saying your name has, and then use string concatenation and then use that variable, then string concatenation again, and after that characters. Now as you can see, we are getting a squiggly line already, but if I run this and provide my name, as you can see, we got another type error. Now this type error is saying can only concatenate str, not int to str. Now str just means string. So in here what the error is telling us that this piece of text is a string, and this user name char, this is a variable which is converted to an integer because we are using the len function which gives us an integer as a value. So in this case I used my name which has 8 letters. This piece of text will be converted to 8, which will then be an integer, and then we are trying to concatenate that integer with a string, which does not work. It has to be the same data type. So if we are trying to concatenate something with a string, that something has to be a string itself. You can think of functions as a fancy machine which can convert potatoes to chips or fries. But if you provided something like a rock, the function is not going to work because it can only convert potatoes to fries. If you give it a rock, it will give you an error. Now how can we figure out the type of a variable? Because in this case it will be hard for a beginner to know that the len function gives us an integer instead of a string as an output. So we can figure out the type of a variable by using the type function. So first we use type, and then inside that the name of our variable, and then we use the closing parenthesis. I'm going to print it out. Now if we run the code, first of all we have to comment this line out because this will give us an error. Run the code again. Now it is asking for my name, and as you can see in here, it told us the type of this variable as int, which means an integer. It is an int because the len function is converting it to an int. Now let's finally look at type conversion. So each data type has a function which we can use to convert a variable to that data type. For integers, it's int. For strings, it's str. For floating point numbers, it's float. And for booleans, it's bool. Now we can use each of these functions to convert a variable's data type from something else to an int or a string, floating point number, or a boolean. So let's try it. I will replace this with a string of 8. In this case, this has a number, but it is a string because it is covered in double quotes. Now if we check the type, it is a string. Now I want you to pause the video and try to convert the data type of this variable to an integer by using this function. Okay, so first what you have to do is you have to use the int function, an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis like we saw here, and inside that you have to provide the variable which you want to convert to an integer. Now to figure out the type, we are going to use the type function, and as you can see we are taking this variable, converting it to an integer, and then figuring out the type of that variable and finally printing it out. So if I run the code, As you can see, it printed out int even though it's a string. So we use type conversion to convert it. Now keep in mind that you cannot convert a string like Muqtadir to an integer. In this case you will get an error because it's trying to convert a rock to fries, which is not possible. That is what we are doing in here. We have a name which we are trying to convert in numbers, which is not possible, so we are getting an error. Now we can also use numbers like 10 and convert them to a string by using the str. Now if we run this, as you can see, it converted it to a string and then printed out the type to us. We can also convert it to a float, and it converted it to a float. Now I will write true in here, and then we are going to convert it to a boolean. Since this is string, it will convert it to a boolean. And if I run this, as you can see, it converted it to a boolean. I hope you have understood type conversion well. In the next video, I have a coding exercise for you which is going to test your knowledge of type conversions. So for all of that and more, I'll see you there.